There are mornings by the lake so calm it feels like nature hit the pause button, just wind in the pines, an eagle's cry far off, and coffee steam curling in cool air. That morning should have been exactly that. I drove my old pickup down the dirt road to my cabin lot, windows down, radio off, soaking in peace I'd earned after a week of real-world noise. My plan was simple: patch a few rotting dock planks, maybe cast a line, and enjoy being the only soul for a mile. Then came the shock. Right in the center of my property sat an enormous white RV so shiny it looked like it had swallowed the sunrise. The thing was parked crooked, like it had claimed the entire clearing. Beside it, lawn chairs, a table, a smoking grill, and even laundry flapping from a rope strung between my pines. It was less, temporary stop, and more, new resort grand opening. For a split second, I thought I'd lost my sense of direction. But then I saw the old wooden sign I'd carved myself, Lot 47, private, and my dock leaning just where it always was. No, I was home, the intruder was not. I parked, slammed my door, and stomped toward the RV. The gravel crunch sounded louder than it should have, like a drumroll for confrontation. I rapped on the door hard enough to rattle the hinges. It flew open, and out leaned a woman with bleached hair, giant sunglasses despite heavy shade, and that invisible crown some folks wear when they believe the world owes them priority. She lifted her plastic cup like a badge. Yes. What's the problem? The problem, I said evenly, is you're parked on private property. My property. Her grin widened, slow and smug. Oh, calm down. HOA says unused lots are for community use. This one's wide open. Not open. Owned. Every inch paid for. She shrugged. Well, go ahead. Call whoever you want. I'm not moving. Then, slam, the door sealed like a fortress. I took a breath long enough to count to 10. The breeze carried the smell of her lunch across my land like an insult. This wasn't a camper, this was a challenge with lipstick and a clipboard somewhere inside that RV. Game on, I thought. My coffee hadn't even cooled, and somehow I was already knee-deep in drama. I stood there glaring at the RV, wondering when basic respect became optional. Instead of fighting emotion with emotion, I decided information would be my weapon. If she truly believed the HOA had granted her divine parking rights, I'd verify exactly how wrong she was. I turned on my heel, climbed into the truck, and headed for the HOA office at the community entrance. The building was small but pretentious, white siding, shiny nameplate, and flower beds trimmed with military precision. Inside, it smelled like scented candles and paperwork. A receptionist who looked like her smile had been laminated greeted me. Good morning, sir. How may we help you? You can start, I said, resting both palms on the counter, by explaining why there's an RV parked on my lakefront lot. The woman inside claims she's got HOA permission. She blinked twice. Oh. Are you referring to the temporary use policy? It's for unclaimed spaces, not owned lots, I cut in. Lot 47. The title's in my name. Her cheerful veneer slipped a notch. Then that policy doesn't apply. But you'd have to speak with the board to formally. Trust me, I muttered, I plan to. I left the office before she finished rearranging her excuse pile and drove straight back. When I arrived, the self-appointed queen of my property was lounging outside the RV like it was poolside season in suburbia, straw in her cup, radio humming softly. As I walked up, she smirked without removing her shades. Back already? Didn't they confirm I'm allowed here? They confirmed nothing except that you're trespassing, I said flatly. Pack up your things. Time to move. She tilted her chin, that dangerous calm people use before saying something infuriating. Do you even know who I am? I've chaired HOA meetings longer than you've probably owned a tool belt. I know the rules. I exhaled slowly. Then you should know about property laws too. Trespassing comes with fines. Oh, I'd love to see that, she sneered. Great, I replied. You've got until sunset. I turned and walked back to my truck, her glare hitting me like the July sun. The day wasn't over, but I already knew this war had only begun. By evening my patience had been chewed to shreds. I called my buddy Frank, a deputy I'd known since high school, and explained the situation. His laugh rumbled through the phone like gravel. Buddy, she's flat out trespassing. HOA can't touch privately owned land unless you signed into their covenant. Didn't sign a thing, I said. Then you're fine. If she refuses, get her towed. You're in the right. Legally covered. Perfect. But a small part of me wanted this settled without sirens or paperwork. Maybe tomorrow she'd catch a reality check and drive off quietly. Spoiler, she didn't. Next dawn, I headed back to the HOA office, documents in hand, because I wanted their official word, not just a receptionist's shrug. The president, a man named Alan, met me in the lobby with a handshake rehearsed for fundraisers. Mr. Daniels, I said. Your member Karen parked her RV on my property. Claims you approved it. Alan's smile held firm but twitched at the edges. Well, our guidelines do allow residents to occupy open lots temporarily for recreational. Recreational doesn't cover stealing someone's land for the weekend barbecue, I interrupted. It's mine, deed and all. He cleared his throat, eyeing the papers I laid on his desk. I see. Technically, that falls outside our authority. Technically and legally, I said. Fix it. When I got back, Karen was sprawled in her lawn chair again, music louder this time, like a taunt. Oh, you brought the cavalry yet? She asked. The cavalry's on speed dial, I said. Alan's coming himself. Her laugh could have chipped ice. Alan knows me. He'll side with me. 20 minutes later, Alan's SUV rolled up the dirt road, immaculate tires and all. He stepped out, smile toxic with diplomacy. Karen, he called warmly, we need to talk. Her sunglasses lowered a fraction. Perfect timing. Tell this man he's harassing me. Alan rubbed his neck. Actually, Karen, this lot is privately owned. We can't authorize your stay here. Her expression collapsed into disbelief. You, what? That's ridiculous. I folded my arms. You heard the man. For a second, silence ruled, the kind that hums right before a thunderstorm. She stormed back into her RV, doors slamming hard enough to echo across the lake. Round 1, mine. Night fell on the lake like a velvet curtain, but my mind refused to rest. Even the frogs sounded irritated on my behalf. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by deeds, tax receipts, and that faded survey map marking, Lot 47, private. Every line of ink whispered the same promise, this place was mine. Still, I wanted airtight defense. So I called Mark, the lawyer who'd handled my purchase years earlier. Tell me I'm not losing my mind, I said the moment he picked up. You're not. She's trespassing, he replied without hesitation. HOA regulations can't override a private deed. They govern collective property, yours predates the association. I leaned back with a long exhale. Good. Because she's dug in like a tick with sunglasses. Mark chuckled. Then it's simple. Document everything. Photos, timestamps, any confrontation, especially if she resists leaving. Then we'll back it with a formal notice. Thanks, counselor. I'll handle the morning shift. I barely slept but hit the road at dawn, coffee in hand and determination hard as steel. When I rolled onto my property, Karen's RV still gleamed smugly in the sunrise. She sat on her steps, sipping iced coffee like it was victory champagne. Well, you're early, she drawled. And you're still here, I countered, stepping closer. I gave you until sundown yesterday. She waved a manicured hand. Technicalities. My husband's bringing supplies, so you'll have to be patient. Not a chance. Here's your official notice, drafted by my attorney. You've got 24 hours before law enforcement gets involved. She tried to snatch the paper but froze when she saw my phone raised, recording. Smile for the evidence, I said. Her jaw flexed, but she stuffed the letter under her arm, muttering, "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said calmly, "but not as fast as you will if that RV's still here tomorrow." As I left, her reflection in the window glared like a warning light. The fight had moved beyond neighborly disagreement. This was a full-scale test of patience and property rights, and I was done being polite. Tomorrow was tow truck day. My kitchen table looked like a lawyer's battlefield, deeds, letters, photos, even a neatly written timeline of her defiance. Mark called mid-morning. "I finished your notice," he said. "Delivered and recorded. Next step. Sheriff approval. After that, she's fair game for towing." "Perfect," I said, scanning the sheet stamped with his firm seal. "I'll make it official." I drove straight to the county courthouse. The clerk, a no-nonsense woman with glasses on a chain, looked up my lot in the records. "Here you go," she said, printing a statement. "This property predates the HOA. They have zero jurisdiction. Could you sign that officially?" "Already did." She slid it across with a smile that said she'd handled one too many Karen cases herself. By the time I left the building, I felt bulletproof, paper bullets, at least. The afternoon sun shimmered over the lake when I returned. Karen's RV was still parked like a ship refusing to set sail. She eyed me as I climbed out of the truck, document folder tucked under my arm. "You again." "Still me," I said. "And now I've got something new, a county-sealed statement confirming your trespassing. Last chance to move voluntarily." Her lips tightened. "You wouldn't dare involve the sheriff." I simply held up the paper. Dare met. A flash of uncertainty flickered in her eyes, but pride overruled reason. She turned brusquely and slammed the RV door. The breeze rustled the pines. I stood there a moment, heartbeat steady now with clarity instead of rage. I had her outmaneuvered in law, leverage, and patience. But there's truth in every showdown, paper doesn't move metal. Tomorrow morning, I needed horsepower, the kind attached to a tow line. Before dawn, I phoned Hank, an old buddy who ran the county's toughest towing service. "I've got an RV squatting on lot 47, I said. "Legal clearances all done." He snorted. "One of those situations, huh? People think lakefront land grows on trees. I'll bring the big rig." When we hung up, I dialed the sheriff's department to make sure every step was formal. Deputy Miller, ever calm, assured me, "You've got legal documentation and a recorded notice. We can supervise if things get spicy." "Spicy's guaranteed," I muttered. By 8 a.m., I drove to the lot once more. The air was cool, heavy with fog curling off the lake. Karen stood outside her RV, arms crossed, posture screaming defiance. "So you're still pretending to be the law today?" "Not pretending anything," I said. "The sheriff agrees." "You overstayed your welcome." She sneered. "You'll pay for the damage when that truck scratches my RV. Then it's probably in your best interest to move it yourself," I said evenly. She spun on her heel and stomped inside, shouting something about lawyers. I only smiled because mine was better. Minutes later, I heard the distant roar of Hank's truck grinding up the dirt road. The low rumbling diesel echoed like thunder through the trees. Karen appeared halfway down the steps, expression shifting from fury to alarm. "You called a tow truck?" "Sure did," I said. "Right on schedule." Hank rolled up, hopped out, and tipped his cap. "Morning, folks. Which eyesore am I removing?" Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't do this," she shrieked. Ma'am, Hank said with practiced calm, sheriff's office cleared it. Step aside or pay a bigger bill. She froze. The situation had officially crossed from debate into reality. And I was just watching justice unfold, one steel chain at a time. Hank's tow rig hissed as he lowered the flatbed ramp. Metal plates clanked, echoing across the quiet lake. Karen darted forward, voice shrill. Touch that RV and I'll sue you for every penny. Hank blinked slowly. Ma'am, if I had a nickel for every lawsuit threat, I'd own 3 lakes. Now, move please. She stayed planted, fists trembling. I stepped beside Hank. Karen, you've had every chance. This is happening by the book, my notice, the sheriff's consent, and a documented trespass. You're bullying me, she spat. No, ma'am. I'm enforcing my rights. Her breath hitched, but the engine's roar drowned her protest. Hank secured hooks to the RV's frame, his movements economical and calm, a ballet of chains and patience. The winch chugged, steel cable tightening like a drawn bow. The RV screeched in mechanical protest before grudgingly rolling backward up the ramp. Karen stood motionless, arms limp. You can't do this, she cried again, voice cracking this time. Hank looked sympathetic but unshaken. Already did, ma'am. When the rig finally locked in place, the scene fell silent except for gulls circling overhead. Karen looked at me as though words might still save her pride. This isn't over, she hissed. I'm counting on it, I said coolly. That way there's a record when you trespass again. She huffed, grabbed a duffel bag, and stormed toward the road. Her steps kicked dust like sparks as Hank secured the last chain. Guess she's not waving goodbye, he murmured. Doubt she's big on thank you cards either, I said, half smiling. He climbed into the cab. This baby's heading to impound. You'll get confirmation once it's logged. Enjoy your peace, friend. As his truck disappeared beyond the hill, I exhaled a week's worth of frustration. The birds, the water, even the buzzing breeze seemed livelier, as if the land itself sighed in relief. But deep down, I knew people like Karen didn't retreat quietly. Pride like that always stages a sequel. Sure enough, the next morning felt like déjà vu, but louder. I arrived at the lot and stopped cold. Standing near the fire pit were Karen, her husband, and 3 members of the HOA board, each armed with clipboards and disapproval. Well, so much for peace. Karen whirled around the moment she spotted me. There he is. The man who stole my RV. Stole. I repeated, incredulous. It was towed after 24 hours of trespassing. Her husband stepped forward, tall, pale, trying hard to look intimidating. You had no right. We pay association fees that maintain this property. That's adorable, I said. Except this property isn't in your association. Alan, the HOA president, looked like someone wishing for witness protection. Everyone, let's keep this civil. Karen cut him off. Civil. He humiliated me, Alan. My RV's impounded because he overreacted. I folded my arms. You ignored legal orders, mocked the law, and used an HOA excuse that never existed. The sheriff can confirm all of it. Her face reddened. I am the HOA. You can't treat me like some trespasser. Karen, Alan interrupted softly, technically you were trespassing. We reviewed the records. He's not part of our community land. Her jaw dropped. You spineless traitor. Before she could ignite again, a familiar patrol car pulled up, the sheriff's cruiser rolling to a calm stop. Deputy Miller stepped out and addressed the crowd. Morning. We've already verified documentation, he announced. This property belongs exclusively to Mr. Daniels. Any further entry without consent constitutes trespassing. Karen sputtered. This is outrageous. Do you know who I Miller raised a hand. "Ma'am, please step off the property before I have to issue a citation." The standoff lasted all of 3 seconds. Then, muttering storm clouds of fury, Karen grabbed her husband's arm and stomped toward their car. The HOA members trailed behind, faces pale and embarrassed. As their convoy disappeared, I finally let myself breathe. For the first time in weeks, the lot was truly mine again, and anyone within 10 miles now knew it. By the time Deputy Miller's cruiser disappeared down the dirt road, quiet finally returned, but it felt heavy instead of peaceful. The echoes of Karen's outrage still hung between the trees like smoke after a fire. I walked to the dock and let my hand rest on the weather-worn railing, choosing calm over triumph. Yet something in me knew this wasn't the end. If there's one truth about people who treat boundaries as suggestions, it's that they only stop when consequences hurt. I didn't want revenge. I wanted finality. That afternoon, I called Mark, my lawyer. "It's handled for now," I said, "but she'll come back. Probably with new tricks." He sighed, the kind of slow exhale that only seasoned attorneys give. "Then we get proactive. We'll file for damages and issue a restraining order. That puts real teeth into the situation." "Do it," I replied. "Make it loud enough that the whole HOA hears it echo." Within days, letters went out, one to Karen, one to the board. They stated, in calm legal phrasing, that any further interference with my property would trigger immediate action. Mark also attached the towing invoice. Their budgets could pay it for me. A week later, the phone rang. Alan's voice was clipped, humility forced through his teeth. "Look. Mr. Daniels, we've reviewed everything. Karen, well, she's extremely upset, but the board wants this to go away quietly. We'll cover the towing fee." "That's a start," I said. "Add a written acknowledgement that my property is outside HOA jurisdiction." "I suppose we can draft that," he said. "Then we're square." When his email came through, an official letter admitting fault, I printed and pinned it to the cabin wall right beside my fishing rods. My kind of trophy. Peace didn't come immediately. Word spread fast around the community. Some folks called to congratulate me, others whispered that I'd gone legal. Either way, they all learned a boundary lesson on my dime. I watched the lake, listening to loons cry in the fading light. Every ripple whispered one word, finally. But stories like this rarely finish without one last echo. It started with a phone call from my neighbor, Jake, a guy with perfect timing for bad news. "You're gonna love this," he said. "Karen's holding court down at the cafe, telling everyone you bullied her." "Of course she is," I muttered. "She'd argue with her reflection if it disagreed." "Claims you faked the paperwork and bribed the sheriff," Jake continued, half laughing. "Whole HOA's tired of hearing about it." I chuckled, not even angry this time. Let her stories evaporate in coffee steam, I had proof carved in ink. Still, Mark suggested one final move, a small claims filing for damages. "It'll seal the record," he explained. Loud complainers quiet down when a judge stamps the truth. A few weeks later, we stood in a cramped county courtroom that smelled faintly of dust and righteousness. Karen arrived clutching a pile of papers like armor, sunglasses perched dramatically on her head, even indoors. When the judge called the case, she immediately began her monologue, something about community spirit and shared property. Mark waited patiently, then stepped forward and laid out our arsenal: the deed, the survey, the sheriff's report, the HOA's apology letter. The judge flipped through them, unimpressed with Karen's theatrics. "Ma'am," he said at last, "you are clearly in violation of property law." Plaintiff prevails. Gavel, bang, done. Karen blinked as if he'd spoken another language. But I was told. "By people who don't own lot 47, the judge interjected. "You owe the towing cost plus a fine for trespassing." The clerk handed me the judgment slip. Mark just smiled. "Told you, dust and righteousness." Karen stormed out, shoes clicking sharp as gunshots on the tile. The door slammed. Outside, sunlight poured over the courthouse steps. "That's that," Mark said, tucking his files away. "That's justice," I replied. Sometimes the simplest victories make the loudest echoes. And for Karen, those echoes would bounce around every HOA meeting for the rest of her membership. The next morning, I returned to the lake for the pure pleasure of silence, the kind of silence that hums like music after too many arguments. The air carried pine sap and freedom. My lot stood empty again, exactly as I'd hoped, no RVs, no squabbles, just sunlight filtering through trees like forgiveness. I parked, threw open the tailgate, and pulled out a toolbox I hadn't touched in weeks. Fixing the dock finally felt good, not like work postponed by someone else's arrogance. Each nail I hammered sounded like punctuation, thunk, thunk, done. By afternoon, the boards were sturdy, the rope lines taut, the view uninterrupted. I sat at the edge of the dock with a fishing pole dangling lazily over the water. For once, no adrenaline, no legal paperwork, only small ripples spreading under a lazy dragonfly. Jake rolled up a little before sunset, his old truck rattling like a popcorn machine. "So," he grinned, "world peace achieved." "Close enough," I said. "Karen paid the fines yet?" "Apparently yesterday." Sheriff forwarded confirmation. I couldn't help a small laugh. Seeing her signature on that check might be the sweetest thing I've ever seen. Jake whistled. "Guess she learned what private property means." "Doubt she learned humility," I said, smiling at the horizon. "But she definitely learned boundaries." As twilight turned the lake to liquid fire, I tossed one last piece of scrap wood on the burn pile. Sparks drifted upward, lazy and satisfied. Peace earned is louder than peace gifted. My patch of earth had cost me sweat and patience, but it stood clean again. I quietly vowed that no self-appointed queen, or entire HOA, would ever rewrite that peace. The lake agreed, whispering against the dock with every gentle wave. Days stretched into a week, and the quiet began to feel natural again. Still, every morning I'd half expect to find another surprise parked halfway across my view. Old instincts die hard. But all I ever found were squirrels and sunlight. Occasionally, the HOA newsletters still slid into my mailbox, even though I wasn't technically part of their realm. I kept one as a souvenir, its cover declared, "Community decorum and shared spaces." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Jake swung by some evenings, and we'd sit by the fire pit retelling the entire saga like two old fishermen exaggerating yesterday's catch. "You realize," he said one night, "this story's going to make you a legend around here." "Great," I replied. "Can legends get a property tax discount?" He chuckled, flame light dancing in his grin. "Karen's been quiet. Guess the HOA wrote a new policy, don't anger the guy at lot 47. "Good policy," I said. As the stars appeared one by one over the glassy surface of the lake, I realized the whole ordeal had given me more than legal clarity, it had reinforced something deeper. Ownership isn't just about deeds. It's about respect, pride, and sometimes the grit to defend what's yours without losing who you are. That night, the fire sank to embers, warmth settling deep in my bones. I leaned back in my chair and whispered a thank you, to the land, the law, maybe even the lesson. Because, truth be told, if it weren't for one obstinate HOA tyrant, I might never have rediscovered how much this cabin, this peace, truly meant. By the second week, the story had become local folklore. Whenever I dropped by the bait shop, someone would nudge a friend and whisper, "That's the guy whose lot Karen hijacked." Then came an approving nod, half admiring, half wary, like I was the unofficial sheriff of property rights. I didn't mind. If a little legend kept future intruders away, all the better. Still, there was a lighter side to it. The lady behind the register handed me my change one morning and winked. "Heard you wrangled the HOA queen. You should bottle that courage, folks around here would buy it." I laughed. Only sells in one flavor, legal paperwork. The best part? The HOA newsletter now included an entire paragraph gently reminding residents to secure written owner consent before occupying any vacant-looking lots. It didn't mention names, but everyone knew. Even Jake couldn't resist teasing. "Careful," he said during a late afternoon visit, "you're one viral video away from a reality show, Karen vs. the Lake." "Let's hope the season finale already aired," I replied. What surprised me most was how polite everyone suddenly became. Neighbors who used to wave half-heartedly now stopped to chat. One couple even asked if I'd mind them fishing near the dock sometime, with permission, of course. I grinned and said yes. Respect, once learned, multiplies faster than gossip. At night, I'd watch light ripples on the water and realize that something good had secretly grown out of the whole fiasco: community awareness. Maybe next time, someone else could avoid the headache because the precedent had been set with Karen's infamous RV fiasco. That thought alone made each breeze through the pines sound like applause. Months passed without a peep from Karen. No letters, no sightings, no HOA knock-and talks. Either she'd finally accepted defeat or the HOA board had diplomatically promoted her to permanent sabbatical. Then, one crisp morning, I saw her, or thought I did, at the gas station on the main road. Same blonde bun, same oversized sunglasses. She caught my reflection in the window but pretended to study the snack rack like it contained state secrets. I gave a courteous nod. No confrontation, no snark. Just closure disguised as indifference. Funny thing, ignoring someone can feel kinder than arguing. Driving back, I wondered if she ever replayed her meltdown in her head the way I sometimes replay victories. People like her live off attention, losing the audience might have stung more than any fine. That night, Jake stopped by with a six-pack and grinned. Heard Karen finally resigned from the board. I raised an eyebrow. Voluntarily? As voluntary as a mutiny can be, he said. Apparently, the HOA realized she cost them goodwill, and legal fees they hadn't budgeted. I chuckled. Actions meet consequences. The lake was calm enough to mirror the stars perfectly. Watching them, I felt something unexpected: empathy. Fighting her had hardened me for a while, but now there was only relief, and maybe a touch of pity. Whatever drove someone to bully neighbors must also make silence unbearable. For the first time, I hoped she found peace somewhere, preferably far from Lot 47. Once drama left the picture, routine filled the frame again. I rebuilt the dock stairs, resurfaced the deck, and even added a small boathouse I'd dreamed about for years. Nothing fancy, just sturdy planks, steady nails, and the smell of cedar curling in the air. Work like that empties your head of old arguments. With each swing of the hammer, the memory of that white RV faded further into the background, like an old bad song finally off repeat. The lake repaid me with quiet rewards: fat trout biting lines, sunset stealing all tension from my shoulders. Now and then, visitors arrived, friends bringing families to kayak or share a weekend bonfire. They'd look around, impressed, and I'd smile without bragging, saying only, "Took a while to earn this solitude." Inside the cabin, I framed a photo of the property from last summer, before the invasion. Next to it hung the legal letter confirming my boundary rights. 2 pictures, one of nature, one of paperwork. Together they told a story of peace maintained by both heart and ink. Jake kidded me about it. "So now you decorate with legal victories?" "Sure," I said. "Beats motivational posters." He laughed, then raised his coffee mug. "To owning our space." I clinked mugs with him, the fire crackling between us, knowing that for the first time in months, every corner of my property felt untouched and unthreatened. One yellow-gray afternoon in early spring, an envelope appeared in my mailbox with no return address. The handwriting was sharp, deliberate, the kind that presses too hard. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting glitter bombs, half expecting closure. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. Mr. Daniels. I realized the situation last year created unnecessary hostility. I misunderstood the HOA's scope of authority and acted on misinformation. I should have respected your ownership from the start. Karen H. No excuses beyond that. No apology novel, just a few lines sounding stiff but sincere enough. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. Whatever her motives, ego, guilt, or legal advice, it felt right to accept it quietly. The past had already caused enough noise. Later, by the fire, I told Jake. He whistled. Well, I'll be. Karen wrote something that didn't threaten a lawsuit. Progress, I replied with a grin. He smirked. You gonna frame that one too? Nah, I said, sliding the letter into a drawer. Some trophies don't belong on walls. The wind picked up then, carrying the scent of rain and renewal. I looked toward the darkening clouds and thought about how storms eventually clear the sky wider than before. Her words, small as they were, had drawn the final underline on this chapter. With the feud behind us, the lakeside community actually began feeling like one. The HOA, now under calmer leadership, invited me to a barbecue, not to appease me, but to rebuild goodwill. I accepted, partly out of curiosity, partly to prove civility could survive even the messiest drama. Alan greeted me at the gate wearing an awkward smile but genuine tone. Glad you came, Mr. Daniels. Fresh start. Fresh as the burgers smell, I said, shaking his hand. The event turned out enjoyable. Kids chased dogs, boat engines droned faintly in the distance, and conversation flowed without hidden barbs. I even caught snippets of folks joking about the famous RV incident, like it was a campfire tale rather than a feud. Legend has it the tow truck came rumbling through like a dragon, laughed one older resident. I played along, only dragon I ever called myself. Laughter rippled around, light and good-natured, the sound of peace restored. By the end of the night, Alan handed me a printed addendum to the HOA guidelines formally recognizing legacy lots, my category of ownership, as fully independent. Just to lock it down, he said. Appreciated. Driving home under a velvet night sky, the lake glimmered like a mirror of relief. For the first time since the RV appeared, I felt not just vindicated but genuinely connected. Conflict, it turns out, can cleanse as well as scar. Soon after, a local podcast reached out. Their title made me laugh, The Day the HOA Met Its Match. They wanted a casual interview about property rights and neighbor diplomacy. I almost declined, then realized sharing lessons could help others avoid similar chaos. Sitting before the mic in a cozy studio, I told the story not with bitterness but humor. The host chuckled at every absurd moment, the laundry line between my pines, the iced coffee attitude, the showdown when Hank's tow truck growled into view. So what's the takeaway? She asked. That ownership means more than paper, I said. It's about mutual respect. If you treat someone's land, or time, as common property, don't be surprised when you get evicted from both. Listeners later wrote messages thanking me for explaining complex boundaries in plain language. It surprised me how many people had their own Karens to deal with. After the episode aired, Alan even emailed congratulations, joking that I'd put Lakeview Estates on the map for all the right reasons this time. I smiled reading it. Teaching through laughter felt better than fighting through rage. Summer returned, bright and slow. My dock wore a new coat of sealant, lilies floated near the shallows, tall as a toast. Every morning I brewed coffee on the porch and watched mist lift off the lake like a curtain, opening act for a day that owed me nothing. Occasionally I'd hear distant lawnmowers or the rhythmic splash of paddles from across the cove. Otherwise, quiet ruled again. One afternoon, as I fixed a loose gate hinge, Jake strolled up carrying a newspaper. You made the community page, he said. I glanced at the headline, Local Landowner Resolves Dispute, Inspires HOA Policy Reform. I laughed so hard the screwdriver nearly dropped. I preferred anonymous peace, I said. Too late, Jake grinned. You're the role model now. Kids waved from passing boats. A neighbor called out, nice work defending the lakefront, Dan. Fame or not, calm had replaced tension completely. The place once overshadowed by an RV now stood as a symbol of balance, law and neighborly respect coexisting like sun and shade. I looked around, absorbing that rare satisfaction that comes only after chaos you didn't seek but conquered anyway. The sun dipped gold behind the trees, staining the water with light. Over the gentle lap of waves, the world finally said nothing, and that silence was worth the whole ordeal. A year later to the week, I returned once more at dawn. The same pine scent, same mist, same quiet road winding to my gate. Everything was unchanged, and that was the miracle. I set a mug of black coffee on the porch railing and watched ripples stretch across the silver water. There, on that modest patch of earth, every bruise from last year had healed into wisdom. Sometimes peace doesn't stay unless you defend it once. I'd done that, maybe more fiercely than I planned, but I'd learned boundaries aren't barriers, they're simply lines that let friendships, communities, even HOAs, coexist without clashing. A gentle wind rustled through the trees, whispering approval. I laughed under my breath. No RVs, no arguments. Let's keep it that way. The lake answered with a soft lap against the dock. As sunlight spilled over the surface, everything felt exactly as it had that first morning, before intrusion, before lawyers, before any talk of trespass. Except now, I carried the calm assurance that if anyone tried again, I'd handle it with half the anger and twice the wisdom. I raised my mug to the horizon. To Lot 47, I said, and to every soul who learns when to stand firm and when to let go. The water glimmered back, a silent cheer. And with that, the legend of the RV, the HOA, and one stubborn man at a quiet lake finally came to rest, folded neatly into local tales, half warning, half inspiration. The peace I'd fought for had come home to stay.